Welcome once again to DWP 2022. This is episode number 11, where we're going to cover African Unity 101. And as always, we're trying to push brand Africa. We're within the broader context of our theme this year. Whoever controls Africa runs this world. And Africans definitely have to control its resources and its brand. So in episode 10, we actually went deep into Pan-Africanism as distinct from African unity, because we wanted to show that the whole essence of Pan-Africanism grew during the time when Africa was not yet independent. None of the African countries were independent. So at independence, and by 1963, when the OAU was formed, the idea was to have independent nation states with non-interference, but then still move slowly towards the Pan-Africanist ideas through gradual incremental steps. So that's basically why we distinguished the two. It was also clear in episode 10 that the call for Africa to really now define itself much more clearly, politically, culturally, economically, that it's on. And that is basically what Brand Africa is about, and how we should look at how to refresh it. In the last episode, we spoke about the scholars on Pan-Africanism generally dividing the whole process into 4 stages. We already completed stage 1 when the diaspora between the 1890s and the end of the Second World War around 1945-50. That period was the first stage where Pan-Africanism was crystallized. The second stage is now 1963, when the Organization of African Unity was formed. The third stage is 2002, when the Africa Union is now formed as a much more solid way forward towards a Africa Union government. So the fourth stage is still to come. And that's when now we are much closer to the Pan-Africanist vision of an Africa Union government. So today, as we focus on African Unity 101, the question is, therefore, is the Africa Union of today and all its entities it has created around it, is it ready? Will it deliver the fourth stage, that is an Africa Union government? So that basically that's what we want to focus on today. So what are the facts? So what are the facts in terms of how far the African Union has gone and is pushing this agenda? Fact number 1 is that Africa Union, after its establishment in 2002, did not waste much time in bringing back the Pan-Africanist agenda. They, within a couple of years, had already established the Obasanjo Committee to look at this agenda. And when that committee reported back to the next summit, they went straight for it. They saw no going back. There was no way out. The recognition that a future united Africa is in no doubt, to use the term they used. However, they still recommended that although there was need to speed up, all the same, ultimately all this was going to be achieved through gradual incrementalism. So episode 10, we could say we concluded that the agenda is still alive. It's actually more alive today under the Africa Union than it was during the period of the Organization of African Unity. Fact number 2 is that, unlike the Organization of African Unity, the heads of states today under the African Union have made quite important concessions. They've diluted their attachment to the nationalism of individual countries that was prime during OAU. So concessions have been made. Now there's tolerance for for a bit of interference in each of the African countries by the other African countries. During the OAU, that was not even possible to think about it. There is concessions around a need for Africans to work together to avoid and prevent major conflicts. And on the positive side, greater economic integration. There have been baby steps even towards how Africa can eventually run a joint military command and all those kinds of things. So let's put it this way. The African Union is moving. One of the things that is also emerging more and more clearly under the African Union is that African countries are decreasingly divided and less vulnerable in the face of the global Cold War between the superpowers and economic globalization. An interesting example is in 2014 when the African Union withdrew from a trade and investment summit with the European Union being held in Belgium then, because the EU would not admit Robert Mugabe, the former head of state, the late Mugabe, former head of state of Zimbabwe. The African Union walked out of the meeting. It's just one of many examples which show that the African heads of states, when they are together collectively, they are less and less threatened by the Cold Wars. Fact number 3 goes back to the Constitutive Act of the African Union, which was put together in the year 2000 when the African Union held its summit in Lome. That piece of legislation is what today holds the African Union together. I mean, that was put together in 2000, but it took another 2 summits to eventually see its implementation, because after that, in 2001, was the Lusaka summit, which then actually drew out the roadmap, how the African Union was going to be established. Then in 2002 in Durban, the African Union was born when the heads of states met. Fact number 4, the structure of the African Union is a serious piece of bureaucracy. This is a type of structure that can only be put by people who are serious. I mean, just to give you 10 of its constituent structures that make it pretty 10 times more solid than the Organization of African Unity. One, they have an assembly, which, of course, they also had in OAU, but the assembly today really makes the highest level policies. Then you got an executive council below the assembly, and the executive council, the selection of heads of states, these are the ones who coordinate and make decisions around the policies made by the assembly. Number 3 is the Pan-African Parliament, based in Midrand, South Africa. It goes a long way in translating these policies into implementable actions at national level. Then you got the Court of Justice. You have got the African Union Commission itself. You got the permanent representative committees of the main executive council. You have specialized technical committees across all key sectors and assist the executive council to implement programs. You got a Peace and Security Council. Then on the economic side, the African Union has established, okay, it's 2 baby steps, but established certainly the Africa Central Bank idea, the African Monetary Fund idea, and the African Investment Bank. these three are ultimately going to be the key drivers of economic integration in Africa. So this is the Africa Union and its structures. The Africa Union Commission then becomes the secretariat of all these entities, the key secretariat in itself, to be able to support the Africa Union. Has 9 departments that it has established: the Department on Agriculture, Rural Development, Blue Economy and Sustainable Environment, a Department on Economic Development, Trade, Industry and Mining, Education, Science, Technology and Innovation, Infrastructure and Energy, Political Affairs, Peace and Security, Health, Humanitarian Affairs and Social Developments, Women, Gender, Youth, Civil Society and Diaspora, and Legal Affairs. The Africa Union Commission is a serious piece of bureaucracy. It is there as the top civil servants working with and for and supporting the Africa Union heads of states and the various constituent bodies of the Africa Union. We will afford ourselves in DWP a full session on the Africa Union Commission, because it's such an important piece of delivery machinery. Equally important, it's fact number 6, is the centrality of the regional economic communities. So just to show how serious the African heads of states are on recognizing and giving greater mandates to the regional economic communities as the major building blocks of a future African Union government. In 2006 in Banjul, Gambia, the summit in the 7th ordinary session made a resolution to suspend any further establishment of regional economic communities, and then recognized 8, which still stand today as the 8 recognized by the Africa Union. That's the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, the Common Market of East and Southern Africa, COMESA, Economic Community of Central African States, ECAS, Southern Africa Development Community, SADC, Intergovernmental Authority for Development, IGAD, Arab Maghreb Union, AMU, Economic Community of Sahelo-Saharan States, SENSAD, and East Africa Community. These 8 regional economic communities are the legs on the ground, are the subunits which have been mandated with implementing AU resolutions, programs. These are the entities, these 8, which will, in my opinion, determine how far Africa is going to go in its quest for full integration. Because in the past, see, the Africa Union had to put a freeze on the creation of additional regional economic communities, because this would just emerge as the political situation changes, as the regional economic situation changes. So some would be established, member states would have multiple memberships, and that then became a problem for the Africa Union in terms of too much overlapping memberships and stifling regional integration efforts. So the Africa Union has urged that the regional economic communities actually coordinate and harmonize their own policies as the way towards ultimate regional integration of the continent. And the Africa Union Commission is mandated and tasked to support the acceleration of those processes. Actually, it's important to point out that the regional economic communities did all signed to the protocol on the relations between the original thought of an African economic community and the RECs. But that was prior to the Africa Union Commission, and that instrument is currently being used for that. The Africa Union is also established after the Obasanjo committee in 2006. They established a conference of integration ministers, and they're still active today. So, in summary, the facts point the Africa Union in 2002 taking over from the Organization of African Unity has grown in leaps and bounds, going laterally and vertically in greater places than the OAU ever did. Not to say there are no challenges today and ahead, but just to point out that this agenda, this vision, is not just alive, more alive than even I thought. But it's here, and the Africa Union and its constituent bodies are probably doing more than us ordinary citizens know, and at DWP we're keen to dig to find out more, because it looks like there's more than meets the eye. So thank you for listening to this analysis. The facts. Let's come back to the analysis in a couple of minutes. Thank you. Welcome back to the analysis section, where I'd like to cover a couple of points. First, I would say that it's clear that after the formation of the Africa Union in 2002, the AU has unleashed a barrage of committees, activities, programs. And definitely after the Obasanjo report of 2006, rekindling the Pan-Africanist vision, the way that the Africa Union has further used the Constitutive Act and all those entities created under it has been a bit more innovative. So although it's all kind of gradual incrementalism, you can see that the Africa Union Commission and the Africa Union Development Agency, NEPAD, much more to play around with. Huge mandate provided for them by the heads of states. Same applies to the regional economic communities, huge mandates. I mean, these are the real building blocks to talk about in terms of realizing the vision of Africa unity and the eventual realization of stage 4, that is Africa Union government. On one hand, put across the key commissions put up by the Africa Union, the Africa Union Commission based in Addis Ababa, and the Africa Union Development Agency, NEPAD, based in Midrand, South Africa. Boom. Then surrounded by other AU entities, the Pan-African Parliament and the central banking structures that we're talking about. Then, on the ground, the regional economic communities really are where the focus has to be when it becomes the issue of translating and domesticating the continental policies and programs into the national programs. It's the regional economic commissions and how they are going to evolve their systems and structures to be able to achieve this. Then in 2015, the Africa Union Commission worked on this Agenda 2063, which is basically now Africa's aspirations and visions towards 2063. Why? Because in 2013, the Organization of African Unity, or the Africa Union, was 50 years old. And So this is a Sankofa it did, a Sankofa looking back 50 years to 2063, and then looking forward as far as we can 50 years down the road to 2063. We will devote a session definitely on the Africa Union Agenda 2063 because is the key instrument put together to guide policies across the board, across everything to do with Africa's integration and development for use by its units, by the regional economic commissions, and at national level. And needless to say that the conclusion of the Africa continental free trade area is just also historic, and we'll devote a session on that. The second point of analysis is basically that although all these developments are taking place, there still remains some major challenges, drawbacks, as always. And my sense is that the main focus right now when it comes to the challenges has to do with economic development, or shall I say economic transformation. This has always been an issue even for the Organization of African Unity. They would always come back to it, but as I will deal with this issue later, economic transformation, I think, was for a long time analyzed and configured wrongly in face of economies which were never really designed with huge design faults, could not take the majority of previously neglected populations, left out by those colonial economies. But in 1980, that Lagos Plan of Action did envisage an African Economic Community, or AEC. That idea is still alive. And today, it's what it has its own feet on the ground through efforts of the regional economic communities and also now on the ground, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. So all these now are coming together. The challenges are still there because in the face of globalization, regional integration is not going to be easy because it means collective competitive advantage when it comes to global trading. And we, in Africa, we are still right at the building blocks. The integration agenda is constantly being harassed and diverted by all these other agreements, trade agreements that we sign with other major blocs. Take, for instance, the European Union's economic partnership agreements, the EPAs. I mean, these are configured in a way that, although most African countries have signed them under duress, basically, these agreements relegate Africa, its farmers, its industrialists, its new enterprises are relegated to consumers and make it difficult to manufacture our own goods and services. So on one hand, Africa is signing all these agreements because they have to somehow continue to trade with these blocs. But some of these are suicidal. They will delay even further this gradual incremental process is not going to be easy economically when there's no coherence between Africa's own agenda to accelerate manufacturing and other global regional blocs who prefer that Africa does not manufacture much. It continues to supply raw materials for a song and continues to be a consumer continent, which just consumes other continents' finished products. That's my biggest worry on that one. Number three, back to the kind of unsatisfactory record in terms of regional integration in the past. Certainly, the record was extremely poor during the OAU days. The Africa Union, by mandating the regional economic commissions, has kind of improved uh, both the policy environment, the circumstances, as well as the political will to see further integration. But there has been pressure on Africa to actually accelerate this speed. Why do I say this? Two things have happened over the last 2 to 3 years that, in my opinion, are a wake-up call for Africa to fast-track its regional integration. Number one was COVID. That little virus, COVID-19, never mind its negative effects that we know, the positive effects are the ones that Africa was too late even to realize, although Africans have woken up to the fact that we cannot run our nations and continents on the assumption that the rest of the world will rescue us when things fall apart. We saw it. The biggest economies in the world could not deal with the virus. In fact, Africans were doing better. The economic stabilities were disturbed. That little virus alone showed that it's not advisable to over-rely on international trade, even for food. That little virus made it clear that this African continent had better be self-reliant on the key things. We must produce what we depend on and depend on what we produce. We can't continue to depend on things that we don't produce. And then what we produce, we don't depend on. It's not valuable. That has to come to a stop. The second happening is, my goodness, just as COVID is kind of slowly dying away, then we have Russia-Ukraine war, which is yet another example of, we should expect these kinds of conflicts far away from Africa, actually, but so close because we're so economically dependent on everybody else. Now, the price of fuel, price of some basic food, including our staples. Remember, if we are not careful, very soon our staple foods are going to be produced by foreign countries, in foreign continents. So, wake up call again. I think it's good for Africa that we have been reminded over the last 2 years that never mind the kind of poor track record with regional integration, now is the time to appreciate we are on our own. We better trade amongst ourselves. And just like all the super economies, United States of America, European Union, China, Russia, Japan, all these are economies who grow by internal trade, not by external trade. You start by creating wealth and exchanging goods and services, especially finished goods and services within the same borders. So this to me is a call coming from the recent challenges due to COVID and regional conflicts. It's about pulling Africa's regional bargaining powers. It's about the capacity of Africa to speak with one voice when we face the World Trade Organization. It's about Africa not being handpicked by the EU and sign individual country EPAs, which are counter to long-term economic growth, is to have a serious capacity within the AU Development Agency, serious capacity to analyze all these trade agreements and then provide key guidelines for regional economic communities and nations. Then ultimately we should be able to face other regional economic blocs with one economic voice and improve our bargaining power and pool our expertise and capacity to meaningfully contribute and shape the global economy at large, and at the same time protecting our own interests and our people's future. So these capacities, like I said, my analysis include economic and policy analysis capacity, but I would say that we have to go beyond what we see and hear in university degree programs, because most of the curriculum is developed in Western countries whose economic textbooks are based on the assumption of an already transformed economy. They've already transformed from predominantly agrarian rural economies to predominantly urban industrial economies. 95+% of the population is already urban industrial. Those textbooks are 50% irrelevant to economies who are still predominantly rural agrarian and are still far away from transforming to urban industrial society. That structural transformation process, which was very orthodox in Europe, is still very unorthodox in Africa. And the economic analysis, policy analysis that I'm talking about is to take that in cognizance. The financial management and accountability actually is just a function of not just a professional skill, which I think is the easy part. When economies are growing, it's much easier to grow these economic financial management systems. When economies are not growing or not growing fast enough, and there's growing poverty, there's growing inequality within society, there's going to be also a lot of gatekeeping. There's going to be a lot of misappropriation of funds and so on. In general, I am arguing for a serious strengthening of public administration systems across the board, especially at provincial, district, community levels. We need public administration institutions who are effective at all levels, capable of handling all the sectors and integrating them more and more as you get to the ground, because when you get to community and family level, they don't know. There are silos of ministries of health, the ministries of agriculture, ministries of industry and commerce on the ground. Families and communities are doing everything, and they need their own local forms of public administration linked up to central and provincial governments that deliver services effectively. In summary, making policies and implementing policies all need to happen at all levels, because national constitutions and the laws that come out of them have to be continually interrogated, interpreted into local bylaws, into local administrative procedures, all the way down to the village. So that's basically my take on how the regional economic commissions and Africa Union Development Agency have to guide national programs in building capacity for integration and economic growth. So the dialectic, in concluding my analysis, the dialectic still remains between how much we're going to copy and paste other regional integration systems such as ASEAN or EU, and I think Africa Union is mostly kind of pointed at the EU systems. How much do we copy and paste that? Is that going to be the foundation? On one hand, and on the other hand, what would be a much more genuine African solution to the foundation? How should we envision the integration of regional economic communities and within them integration of national economies and ultimately one Africa Union, free trade area or even government? How do we build this based on African realities and circumstances and our understanding of how families and communities integrate into nations? So this dialectic is something that's out there. I'm not sharing enough analysis of this. And I think at DWP, it's one of the things we're going to throw out there at people. We continue to analyze the Africa Union, the Africa Union Commission, and all the constituent structures and see how far, in what ways, in what areas does it make sense to just copy and paste foreign systems, and in what ways do we need to create our own foundation and at least copy intelligently and Africanize these systems for greater integration. So that basically concludes my analysis, and I'll see you shortly for conclusion. So welcome back to the conclusion. And today we are concluding on African unity, 101, the way, the building blocks, trying to analyze whether the African Union established in 2002 now has all it takes to take Africa to stage number 4, that is an Africa Union government. And it's an overwhelming yes. We are on the way. The Africa Union started off with determination to bring back the Pan-Africanist movement. And although there are some major challenges, it appears there are some answers to that as well. But as always, to remind you, whoever controls Africa runs this world. And as Africa controls its resources and its own vision for the future, Africa will be the undisputed economic superpower in this world after the USA and China. So it can only be an Africa that controls its brand. So the brand Africa must retain its original magical formula as people who best understand life and humanity. So although the Pan-Africanist vision was most vivid during the periods of diaspora up to the end of the Second World War, that's the time when it was most vivid. But after independence, especially between 1963 and 2002 under the OAU, that's the period when the vision was most dim. 2002, we have the Africa Union up there, and they have rekindled the original vision. Okay, they accept that it still can only be achieved through gradual incrementalism. But when you listen to the analysis today, the facts and the analysis, it's an accelerated gradual incrementalism. That might sound like a contradiction, but when you compare 50 years of OAU and what the Africa Union has done in 2 decades, definitely it's an accelerated incremental gradualism. So the challenges that remain, which include, like I say, still operating in a global economy which is lopsided, the global economic structure and its systems favor the wealthy nations and penalize the poor ones and treat the poor ones as, well, it's your fault that you're poor in the first place. Never mind what they did to ensure that Africa remains poor and able to even manufacture its own products. But all the same, things are okay as long as the system is working. When the system breaks down, you're on your own. So in my opinion, both COVID and these regional conflicts are answers from African ancestors' prayers to our Creator that, hey, the answers lie within Africa here, you know. Answers for self-reliance and self-determination, discovering our own realities and truths, experiencing, exploring and leading happier lives. So it's those truths that we discover for ourselves that are most rewarding, that build a stronger brand. These are the highest values that we as Africans need to co-create our desires for a one Africa which speaks with one voice. A lot of peace, a lot of prosperity, a lot of freedom for Africans. That is what it takes to refresh brand Africa. That's what it takes to modernize rather than westernize Africa. So thank you once again for your time, and I look forward to seeing you again in the next segment. Bye. So my name is Mandi Rukuni. I authored this book, Being African, which I'm recommending to you. You stand a chance of winning a copy of this book in the DWP competitions. But I wrote this book primarily because we Africans often confuse westernization with modernization. So this book goes through what it takes for us to modernize Africa using our heritage rather than westernizing it. So Wunu, Botu, Ubuntu, Udugu is what this book is about. I recommend it to you highly, and those who want the practical side of how to succeed using heritage values, you can go to the small handbook of African Pathways to Success. Look forward to you participating in the competition. Thank you.
Stand a chance to win a copy of the book, Being African, or the booklet, African Pathways to Success, by subscribing to our YouTube channel, Dialogue with Prof Mandi Rukuni, and leaving a comment on one of our recent videos. You can also like our Facebook page and comment on a recent post. If you're on Instagram, follow the profile Prof Mandi Rukuni and leave a comment on a recent post as well. A random participant will be chosen at the end of the month and will be contacted and given the book.